It is quite an overwhelming thing to be a bloke up here talking at a women's conference, trying to help you become better women in God for your life. If my 15-year-old self could see me now, he might have felt a little bit better of some of the pain and trauma that he put himself through. One of which was a ride home on my bicycle from school. I used to ride my bike to school, and I was at a big boys' school. Right next to us was a big girls' school, probably 1 kilometer apart. And our finishing bell was about 5 minutes earlier than theirs. And this particular fateful day, I was close to where my bike was parked as school finished, jumped on, and I rode home. And the bike track literally went in front of the length of the school. And there was a little change of pathway where the path hit the tar parking lot, and there was a little dirt kind of U-shaped track that went next to it. And I hit this track. Maybe my adrenaline was up. Maybe it was the fact that the girls were now coming out of school. I just wanted to get past there as quickly as possible. But I hit that little dirt U-shape way too fast. My bicycle went one way. I went the other way, sprawled out on the ground with my bag over my head. If I was all by myself, it would have just been my knees and elbows that would have been hurt. But with about 200 sets of female eyes on me, all finishing school, it was a dreadful, traumatic incident. I'm still thinking, as I think about it, this pain I went through. The first few girls were compassionate, people like yourselves, and they went, "Oh, look, are you okay?" The batch behind them just started laughing. They were giggling. It was the kind of incident where you could have broken your leg. I was going to get back on the bicycle and keep riding. I reckon I was another kilometer down the road. I could feel this heat of just shame and embarrassment virtually setting my hair alight as I carried on riding. And I wanted to tell that story because when nobody's watching and you really tax up like that, it's okay. It's just painful. But when you've got all these eyes on you, it's not so nice to be seen when you want to just crawl into the ground and the ground to swallow you up. There's an amazing story in the Bible, and I love the stories of the Bible because all of us are wired for narrative. We're wired for story, and the Bible is written actually primarily as a story with all of God's truth kind of woven into it. And there's a story very early on in the Bible about a lady named Hagar who doesn't have the best, if I could say, start or backstory. And I'd like you to read this together with me. It will come up on the screens. It's from Genesis chapter 16, verse 1 to 10. Maybe I should just preface it for those who are less familiar with the Bible, is that regularly throughout the Bible you read that one of the kind of heroes, the forefathers of faith, was a man named Abraham. His original name was actually Abram, and he was married to a lady named Sarai, and her name later became Sarah. So we know them as Abraham and Sarah. But later on, they become known as these great people of faith, and they get multiple promises by God of the nation that's going to come from them as a couple, that God is going to bless them. At least 3 times before the story, we see this promise. God speaks to Abraham, and he says to him, "Buddy, there's a nation coming from you. You're going to be blessed." Let's head into the story. Genesis 16:1. Now, Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. There's a problem. The promises and her reality. But she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. Also, the backstory is that she was now well on in years, past childbearing age. She has a slave named Hagar, so she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her." By the way, the Bible doesn't celebrate any of what's happening in these verses. This is not a good idea. It's a bad mistake all round. But we need to perhaps have a little sympathy for Sarah for the pressure she was under. First up, it wasn't that uncommon for families of the day to grow like this. Men would take on multiple wives of their slaves as well. So this wasn't entirely unknown, but it definitely wasn't God's plan for Abraham and Sarah. There was also the social stigma, much, much, much worse in those days. If a woman was childless, it was a state or status of great shame in those days. Apart from just the personal heartache, socially, She had stigma. And I guess that she felt she was the one basically letting Abraham down in this idea of the promise that God's given them. And man, the time has come and the time has gone. And there's no children. Abram agreed to what Sarai had said. Another mistake. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian slave, Hagar, and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. Diabolical. Mistake by Sarah, mistake by Abraham. It's just everything is compounding. And the poor girl in the middle of all of this is the slave from Egypt named Hagar. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, listen to this marital conflict brewing up here. Then Sarai says to Abram, you are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. Sarah heads into some irrational territory, and Abram doesn't argue back. He's just like, she says, I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. And then she just drops the hammer on Abraham. May the Lord judge between you and me, Abraham. Many lesser men would have backed off a whole lot quicker. Abraham just basically says to her, your slave is in your hands. Do with her whatever you think is best. Sorry. And then another mistake is made. What I actually appreciate about the Bible is the Bible doesn't try and sugarcoat people's mistakes. These people of faith, they were making some really bad errors. And then another one gets made. Sarai mistreated Hagar, so Hagar fled from Sarai. Everything in here has been going bad, bad, bad. Now, just before I read the next verse, I'd like you to put yourself in Hagar's position. We've been talking about all that's going on around her. But how many of you would like to trade places with Hagar at any point in the story we've just read? She is a slave. Not getting a salary for doing the work. That's just, she is legally considered owned by Abram and Sarah, which is why they did what they did. She has suffered workplace sexual abuse. She's been impregnated by her owner. She is now pregnant. She's being beaten by Sarah, the so-called lady of faith. Everybody else looks at Sarah. Oh, isn't she so lovely? It's wow. She reaches such a desperate point in her life that she sees the only path left for me is to run away. I don't know if you've had a feeling like that. I've sometimes felt like that. I just can't see a way through with and I've never been anywhere close to this. So this is a slave, runaway, pregnant, and she's headed into the desert with no income. The father of this child is just, what do you even say about that? And here she is, desperate at a very low point. And this next verse, it speaks to me. It says, the angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur, which would have been well known to the people of that geography. And the angel, says to her, now just a little, tussen hakkies here, borrowing some Afrikaans there, yeah, Whenever the angel of the Lord appears in the Old Testament, he is the representative of God himself. It is as if God was standing there. This angel isn't just operating by himself. He's there as God's representative. This is God appearing to Hagar. And he says to her, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from? And where are you going? It wasn't because he didn't know the answer, by the way. And she answers, I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai. I've had a terrible situation, basically. I'm down. Then the angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. Oh, that wasn't the next word I wanted from God. Then the angel added, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. And then I'm jumping down to verse 13. This girl, Hagar, in the most desperate part of her life, she says this, It says this, she gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her, you are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. That is why the well was called Bir Lahai Roi. It is still there between Kadesh and Bered. Now, in her language, Bir Lahai Roi means the well of the one who sees me. The well of the God who sees me. There's so much in the story that's just kind of question marky up in the beginning. But where it gets to the point, so Hagar's had all of this stuff happen to her. She's a victim in many ways, and it's outside of her control. Perhaps like many of the stuff that's happened in some of your story and some of mine. We might not be in as bad a place as she got to, but all of us have had stuff in various points happen in our worlds. And there's some stuff in our futures as well. And this is an encouraging message, I promise. But an incredible thing happens that at the lowest, darkest point of her journey, God himself appears to her and he essentially says to her, Hagar, I see you. And this idea of seeing is synonymous with knowing. It's not just like the girls laughing at me when I fell off my bicycle. It's not that kind of seeing. God himself is appearing to her and say, Hagar, you feel like you're all alone in the world. The people that should have protected you have abused you. The people that should have helped you hurt you. But I am the God who sees you at your lowest point. And he deals with her there in a way that changes her story and the rest of her life. And I'll mention that at the end. Please remind me if I forget, Jax. Just the end of Hagar's story. It's a beautiful thing to understand that although Hagar didn't realize that God always saw her and he always knew her, she only became aware of it at that moment. There might be some ladies here today that the last part of your journey has been one that's been distant from God. Maybe your whole life you've been away from him and you've just been living your own life and you reach a point, maybe today's the day that you realize there's this amazing God who actually sees me and he knows me. You had that thought today for the first time in a while. But God, every single day of your life, when you put your head down on the pillow, he sees you and he knows you. And when you wake up in the morning, you've got too much to do. I don't have enough capacity. I see you and I know you and I've known you every minute of your life because I'm the God who sees. The beautiful thing about this God who sees is that he doesn't just leave Hagar there with like just a little, pat on the shoulder. I hope it's going to turn better. But I pick up that there's three things that God does in this moment of her understanding, the seeing and the knowing. And the first thing he does is he asks her a question to give her direction. A question to give direction. And this so often in the Bible is God's way with his people. God never asks a question because he's confused. He always asks a question because he wants us to come up with a different answer. Right? So when he says, Hagar, where have you come from and where are you going? There's something beautiful in this question. It's not just, hey, Hagar, how are you doing? Hagar, where have you come from and where are you going? And the truth of it, God knew it all along. She's come from a place of pain and heartache, and she's in a moment of absolute hopelessness. Like, I don't even want to start, angel of the Lord, with how bad it's been where I came from. Maybe you're seated here today and you're like, I can hear all these stories, but Des said that you got such a beautiful ending. And Leonie, but you don't know where I'm at right now. No, nobody does. But there is one, and he counts more than any other human being. The God who sees and the God who knows. And he asks her a question, where did you come from? And more importantly, where are you going? And what's her answer? She doesn't have any answer onto where she's going. She just knows I'm running away. And that's often our response to difficulty and hardship. It's like, I don't know what, I'm just running from that. And can you see how the question starts to give her some direction? She's never asked God, what would you have me do? She's just done what she thinks is the next best thing to do. And the God who sees and the God who knows her gives her advice that she doesn't really want. This isn't advice, this is a command. He says, Sarai, I want you to go back and basically humble yourself and submit back to Sarai. Wow. Can you imagine? So I'm just a little jump into my imagination here. Can you imagine the moment she arrives back? How shameful that might have been for her. I don't know if she had a suitcase or just whatever she was carrying, and now she kind of slinks back. Everybody knew Hagar had left. She went out in a burst of smoke. And now she comes back like, Hagar, what's happening? I'm back. What happened? This angel appeared to me and said to come back. Imagine her fellow slaves who like, this is just wrong what happened to her. Hagar, don't come back here. Just keep going. And she says, no, God appeared to me. And he told me to come back. And there's such an amazing lesson here for us, because so often we think that the pathway to future hope and our dreams being fulfilled is leaving anything painful behind. But actually God says to her, if you want to move forward, you're going to have to fix a little bit of what's behind you. We're not told what all got fixed or how or any of that stuff, but we know that for the next 12 years, Hagar worked back in that same family, and she had that baby boy, and he grew up till he was 12, as when we next read about him. And amazingly, in God's purposes, he often loops us back when we leave just a mess unresolved. We just want out of here, and we meet the angel of the Lord. He says, I see you and I know you, but I want you to go back and sort some of that stuff out. But that's not the end of the story. The second thing we see God do to Hagar in this moment is he gives her a promise in spite of the pain. It's go back. And there's a promise for you, Hagar. I see you. And I know you. And this is the angel of God. Imagine this moment, her at her darkest with this angel. And the angel just says to her, you got to go back. She's like, okay. And he says, but I want to tell you that an entire nation is going to come from what's in your womb right now. This promise in spite of the pain. This pregnancy of hers, I'm pointing to my tummy like, I might look pregnant, but I've never been pregnant. What an amazing miracle. But this pregnancy, it was very shameful for her. This wasn't a happy thing. And God says, I'm taking this chaos and this mess, and I want you to know, Hagar, I'm still in charge of it all, and there's an entire nation going to come. You little slave girl, if I'm putting in that feeling so alone and so desperate, I've got my eye on you, and I've got my eye on that baby. Although everything Abraham and Sarah have done in this situation was a big mistake. God never wanted them to do that stuff. He still redeems the mistake. There's a promise in spite of the pain. You see, this is such good news for me and for you, because some of us feel like our lives are in a cul-de-sac, or we're on an eternal roundabout because of other people's actions. We blame everyone around us. If you just knew, Steve, about this person, about that person, my husband, my daughter, in spite of all of that, God says, regardless of other people's mistakes, I've still got a promise for you, because I see you and I know you and I care. The third thing that happens in the story, which I love, is that there is a well in this wilderness. And I love the way that the story ends around this well. There's been a theme of this conference, and I didn't actually realize it was so much of a theme when I was preparing my message. But here goes. She's in a desert. In this part of the land of Israel, it's very, very dry. This isn't necessarily, this is a picture of a well in a desert, but just to give us a little bit of, maybe there was a tree there wherever Hagar ended up, but she ends up in a desert. There's a road going close by, and there's this well, and wells are in short supply. There's not streams and rivers, etc., just these wells. And she's seated next to this well where she has this understanding, this revelation that God sees me. And this verse that ends off the story is so powerful and it's so profound. She says, I have now seen the one who sees me. I have now seen the one who sees me. And she says, I'm giving this name to God. You are the one who sees me. When I wake up in the morning and I start to sing some of those songs, and when I'm a little off kilter and I start to remind myself of who God's like, there's one more thing to remind me, is you're the God who sees me. You're the God who knows me. And she goes further than that. She says, I'm actually going to call this well by a new name. I don't know what everybody else in the world called it, but my name for it is, it's the well of the God who sees. Now, there's a beautiful picture in this, because Hagar's life, if you could put that picture of the desert up again, please. Hagar's life on the surface looks like that. Her circumstances are like that. But the revelation she has, the God who sees me, creates a well in the desert. And for the rest of her days, she walks forward. And her ongoing revelation is, I live in the audience, as an audience of the one who sees me. That revelation, that truth, becomes the well of water from a very deep place that feeds her soul, and that becomes the source of life outward and onward. My question, therefore, for you today is one of your names for God, that He's the one who sees me. Is it one of the things that you've come to know and appreciate and love about this amazing God, that He's the God who sees you and who knows you? Because when that happens in our world, there's a deep well that gets dug inside of your life and mine, and things change. When I was 12 years old, in grade 7, in the April of that year, my mom suffered some real difficult health issues, major stuff. I was the oldest of 5. My youngest sister was just 6 months old, and the 5 of us were carted off to 3 different places. So my mom was in hospital for months. Myself and my next brother down were sent off to boarding school, half an hour away. Tim and my sister were sent off to relatives far away. My younger sister sent off to other relatives. We didn't see each other for months and months. And at the end of the year, we all came together again, and my mom quite miraculously was healed, and it just felt like we're back as a family. But the next year, I by myself was going off to another boarding school, leaving my now reconstituted family behind. In retrospect, I can see that I actually was suffering a whole lot of trauma through all this that happened, a very vulnerable stage, I guess, in my life. And that holiday, I had nightmare after nightmare of going to boarding school, to a different school, now high school, as a young grade 8, all by myself. The January of that year, like the week before I went, my dad gives me a gift of a Bible. It wasn't a new Bible, it was one of theirs, but one that I always liked to page through. And he wrote a letter in the front, basically just saying, God's with you. And I hated being in boarding school. Every day I hated it. And I was desperate. And then I just thought, well, nobody else is going to help me. No, there's no one else here. It's just me. And God. And I had my Bible hidden away under my clothes. I was so embarrassed that anybody would know. I was vulnerable. But I started to wake up 15 minutes before the morning bell. I think the morning bell went at 6, and at 5:45, I would wake up, and I'd take my Bible and kind of slink out, hoping nobody else would wake up. And I found this place in one of the lounges behind one of the couches where I could sit. If you walked through the door, you wouldn't see me. And hiding away in the corner, I would page through this Bible and just read some of the stories and some of the verses, often like teary, because it reminded me of home. And there in the corner of that lounge behind the couch, have this deep revelation that there's the God who sees me. This little 13-year-old, desperately insecure boy. But there's a God who sees me. Nobody else, it felt like no one else cared. But here I am in boarding school, 15 minutes there, with my Bible, speaking to the God who sees me. It was like in that desert place, the well gets dug much deeper somehow in the desert than when everything looks green. And it's been something that I've had to revisit over and over in my life, whenever there's been pain, trauma, hardship. Where's the well that goes down? Because when the surface isn't looking good, there's got to be something deeper, and that's been a constant theme throughout this conference. But Hagar's name for the well, it's the well of the God who sees me. I don't need to have all my needs met. He's the God who provides. He's the God, all of those things. But I love this picture, this name she gives God. He's the God who sees me. As part of this message, our team designed a little sticker that's somewhere on your chair as well. Shaped like a little mirror is the idea behind it, in case you're wondering. I've actually stuck it on the back of my phone. And it's a quote from this verse, Genesis 16:13. I have now seen the one who sees me. My invitation to you is to stick it up somewhere that you can see it every day and remind yourself that there's a God who sees me and there's a God who knows me. And He cares about me. He cares about you regardless of your story, regardless of the desert on the outside. Jax mentioned, and if you're part of CityHill, you've heard me talk about her often, our little girl Trinity, who was in that video. And this beautiful adoption process that we've had over the last nearly 3 years. And thanks for sharing your story. There's, as Jack said, it really brings a lot of hope because it hasn't always been easy. She's such a cute little thing on the outside, but is also, she's on her journey. So she arrives in our home, this really, really timid little girl. And like our hearts are so moved. I was so proud of my boys. They were 15 and 13 at the time, and both of them were just so like compassionate towards it. Both of them offered to give up their rooms. But for a teenage boy to offer to give up anything is quite a lot. And we were all just in there. So we're feeling all this compassion going out. But a psychologist that's been helping us on the journey explained to us that because of her processing, she's got to form new bonds that babies start to form. And a baby normally forms its bond firstly with its mom and then with the rest of the world. And so this is her journey again. And she's got to, it would be a miracle, she said, if she bonded with Jackie. That's the thing you should pray for, is at least one of these bonds. And amazingly, she bonds with Jackie like her favorite human being in the entire world. Last night, I picked her up from childcare. I come say goodnight to mom so that we can go home. She just cries. I don't want to go with daddy. I want to go with mommy. And then I go to like, and off we go home. And she's fine by the time we get there. But she loves Jax, which is miraculous. But in that first year, we're now in the third year, so I'm telling you stories from 2 years ago. In that first year, there were so many days where she didn't want anything to do with me, which was kind of normal in her process, but it felt really terrible. And there were times I felt like just fighting back. It's like, hey, do you know what? You know, we've... And I would often just in my prayer walks with God talk to Him about it. It's like, hey, Father, this is really irritating stroke painful. This little thing, and she just whoosh, wants nothing to do with me. And then I started to think, actually, that's like so many of us and the Father in heaven. Geez, talk about being adopted into an amazing family, the family of God. And we say so often, Father, thank you, but I'm okay for the next few weeks. I'll call on you if I need anything. I don't want too much to do with my brothers and sisters because they like, you know, people in the church can sometimes be a little bit. And all families are like this. And so I'm processing that with God. But Jax and I then decide that we're going to put something in place that's going to be my and her time to give us the best chance of bonding. And it's every night after supper, bedtime. She always wants mom, but she just knows, now I get dad. But it's become the most special moment for us because we generally do story together. And then Jackson and I decided that we're going to put a little habit in place that every night after story time, we're going to do special words. So we just picked our own, 5 of them. And for pretty much close on 3 years, this is what she has every night. If I'm away, I'll sometimes record the video. Sometimes my boys step in. On behalf of Dad, they're doing special words. But this is what I say to her every night, looking her in the eyes, because sometimes she's distracted. It's my girl, you're special, and you're precious, and you're brave. Look at Dad, look at me. You're loved, and you are ours. We love you very much. And the first few nights, it was just, but it's taken such root in her heart that she refuses those words to be done in any other order or replaced by any other words. I will tell her, Trinity, you are beautiful and you're amazing and you're gorgeous. She says, stop, Dad, thank you. But please do it right. And then I'll say, you're precious and special. She says, no, it's special and precious. And I say, you're special, precious, brave, you're a rascal, you loved you out. She says, no, please do it right, Dad. every night, before we say prayers, she hears those 5 words. I don't think she pays them too much any attention anymore because they've just become part of our language. But there's an incredible thing, and I'm lining this up with this story, is that there's a Father in heaven who's adopted some pretty messed up children. Everything that belongs to him is available to us, and we are so dysfunctional so often. So often. And yet, every single moment of the day, the Father is looking over us. Whatever words work for you, I'm just telling you what I use with my little girl, but the Father is declaring over my life and over yours, you're special, and you're precious, and you're brave. Even when we're scaredy cats, He says, you're braver than you think you are. You're brave, that's what you're becoming. You're loved and you're mine. You're doing okay, my boy. You're doing okay, my girl. I know you didn't get everything right today, but I love you. And when we fall asleep, the Bible says He never slumbers or sleeps. He's watching over us every single minute of every single day. And yet so often we live without the revelation that this is the God who sees me. And so a pregnant slave girl running away from her mistress brings us an incredible revelation that there's a God who loves me and who sees me and who knows me. I'd love to invite you, as I land this part of this session, if you'd stand together with me, please. I'm going to invite the musicians to come onto the stage. I think Tam's going to sing for us in a minute as well, so I'll make this quick. Thank you, Jax. The end of Hagar's story is 12 years later. She gets chased away again. But this time the circumstances are very different. And the angel of God meets her again. And he says to her, Hagar, I've still got you. Now you've got a new pathway. You're free of that family. But I'm going to give you a pathway of your own. That's part of Hagar's story. So even in the revisit, there was all this redemption, another pathway. 12 years later, another angel appears to her. God still got her every single step of the journey. Why don't we close our eyes together? And right where you're standing, maybe you've drifted far away from God. Maybe you have no relationship with Him at all. Maybe you do know and love Him. I hope that I've reminded you today that He's the God who sees you. And that you together with Hagar could say back to Him, I have now seen the one who sees me. I have seen the one who sees me. You know me. Sometimes I want to run and hide from you, Lord God. But you know all of my best and all of my worst, and you still love me. And you still accept me. I wanted to land by doing something off the back of my story with Trinity, that if you could imagine that instead of me on this microphone saying these words, it's the Father in heaven saying them directly over your life. That as you see the one who sees you, your heavenly Father says over your life, you're special, you're precious, you're brave, you're loved, you are mine. You're special, you're precious, you are brave, you are loved, and you are mine. Father, we thank you so much that you're the God who sees us and you're the God who knows us. We love you. In Jesus' name.